Welcome to Biology 1. This is Chapter 1, the study of life. In this chapter, we're going to take a look at an introduction to biology, also the characteristics of life, as well as the nature and methods of science. Science comes from the Latin term scire, which means to know, which is a really good way to describe science because that's what scientists do. They perform investigations to know. And this year in particular, we will be focusing in on biology, which is the science of life. So what do biologists do? Most importantly, all biologists make discoveries, and we can use that information to forward the discipline of biology and science in general. Biologists can perform laboratory and field investigations. Some biologists are exclusive to the lab or the field, but many biologists perform a little bit of both. Because biology is the study of life, understanding the different forms, the diversity of life, and how we're all interconnected is an important thing that biologists do. Biologists in the medical field, they research diseases, not just symptoms of diseases, but causes of diseases. Genetic causes of diseases, environmental causes of diseases, perhaps treatment options for said diseases. Biologists will develop technologies. There, the gentleman on the left is kind of the bionic man. That prosthetic was engineered for him to have the use of an arm and a hand. Biologists are also out in the farms and in the fields to improve our agriculture. There's 7 billion people on the planet, and we all need to eat. And it's important that the plants and animals that we use for agriculture continue to be improved to give higher yields, etc. Biologists in the field of ecology or environmental science take a look at preserving the environment. Because all life has to live somewhere, it becomes necessary for us to understand the connection with the physical environment to the diversity of life. So what is life? How do I know I'm living? How do you know you're living? An organism is any living thing. All organisms are made of one or more cells. Cells are the basic unit of life. You can't be any more simple than one individual cell. Living things display organization. If you are a single-celled organism, then congratulations, you're organized. But for many other life forms, those cells will group together to do a similar job, and they will perform as a tissue. And tissues perform together to form an organ. And organs will work with other organs in an organ system to make the whole organism. Living things grow and develop. A lot of people use those terms interchangeably, but they do mean different things. Growth is adding mass. Development is noting the changes that are taking place. Human babies, they start out as a fertilized egg, well, embryos. Then we have a baby, then we have toddlers, then we have adolescents, then we have adults. So development denotes the change that is taking place over a person's life. Growth is just getting bigger. All living things reproduce. Living things have two choices. They either reproduce asexually or reproduce sexually, but all life needs to have the production of more offspring to ensure the survival of the species, which is a group of organisms that can breed together and produce fertile offspring, meaning that the babies can also have babies in the future. Living things react to what's going on around them. They respond to stimuli. A stimulus is anything in an internal or external environment that causes a reaction. And that reaction we call a response. In the diagram here, we have the light coming into the eye. When there's low light, the pupil's dilated. When there is bright light, the pupil is constricted. So the stimulus is the level of light, and the response is the dilation or contraction of the pupil. All living things need energy to perform life's functions. Some organisms make that energy on their own through sunlight or chemical processes. Most other organisms will need to consume others to perform life's functions, to eat. All life maintains homeostasis. I like to refer to homeostasis as an organism's internal happy place. You need to maintain homeostasis as an organism, because if you don't, you may not survive. There are many internal mechanisms that kick in an organism's body to get it back to homeostasis. Living things will change and evolve over time. Living things will adapt. Adaptations are inherited characteristics that result in changes to a species over time. Here we have the Arctic hare in the spring and in the winter. That adaptation of that fur change helps the survival of the Arctic hare to be able to have little baby bunny hares in the springtime. The nature of science. We've talked about this as a discipline. Study is the study of nature and its physical setting. Things that are observable and testable are science. Things such as paranormal investigation. There's a reason why it's called paranormal. Para means out or around. So you have something that's outside of a normal and natural setting. Only things that are normal and natural can be studied by science. The central purpose is asking questions or inquiry through observations and experiments. Science uses theory. Now remember, a scientific theory is an explanation of natural phenomena. Theories are not vague ideas put out by scientists. They are supported by many observations over many different people over a long period of time. Scientific laws, these are explaining why natural phenomena occur. We can take a look at theories and laws. Scientific theories, the theory of evolution in biology, for example, the law of gravity, okay? We can take the theory of evolution and modify that as new information comes along. We can modify that to make it better explaining. Sometimes we can disprove different theories, depending if that new evidence refutes what is already known. Scientific laws can also be modified to better explain, but they cannot be disproved. Science expands scientific knowledge. Research is always resulting in constant reevaluation. Scientists are always checking up on each other. Science challenges accepted theories. Science always progresses forward with those new discoveries and is challenging what is always already known. Science will question its own results. Data and findings need to be as accurate as possible. You cannot make up results to fit what you want. Science has to be repeatable, so your data and findings need to be accurate so you get that repeatability. Science tests claims. We have the scientific method as the standard experimental procedure. All good science data is gathered in a controlled experiment, if possible, a laboratory setting, and must be as unbiased as possible. No agendas, no fixing data to fit what you want it to fit. Science undergoes peer review. A peer review board is a group of scientists that work in a similar field that will go over work done by another scientist. Scientific work is often repeated. Science is never a one and done sort of situation. We have one standard measurement system that we use. We use the metric system, or SI, so meters, grams, and liters. Now, why do we teach science? We teach science to increase your scientific literacy. If you can have basic understanding of science with reasoning and thinking skills. Critical thinking, problem solving, that doesn't just happen in science, that happens in everyday life. And learning science can hone your skills in that. Now, science isn't always pretty. It isn't always nice. Sometimes it's a little controversial. Bioethics are a set of moral principles or values in biology. Some bioethically controversial subjects, things like cloning humans, cryogenics, freezing of people or organs, eugenics, which is a fancy word, kind of term for ethnic cleansing. Methods of science. All good scientists follow the scientific method. Before hopping into the laboratory, scientists make observations. They notice things using the 5 senses. After they've observed something, they may do a little background research. They can come up with an inference. An inference is a logical conclusion based on what you've researched and what you've seen. So the scientific method is what all good scientists use to gather their information and ask questions. All science experiments will need a hypothesis. It's a testable explanation of a situation. If a hypothesis is supported by the data that you collected, that hypothesis is valid. If the data doesn't support your hypothesis, then you may need to undergo more investigations. So the experiment itself, again, if possible, in a controlled or laboratory setting, but that's going to test your hypothesis. In an experiment, you will have 2 different groups many times. The control group is used for comparison. The control group does not receive any manipulation. Sometimes it's called, for example, a placebo. The control group or samples don't receive the testing. The experimental group, on the other hand, do. That's the group exposed to the factor being tested, so they do receive manipulation. So, good experimental design. You only want to test one thing at a time, so your results will be understandable. So, you test for the independent variable. That's the factor being tested. The dependent variable is the change that happens because of that independent variable. In every good experiment, you need to have certain things that stay the same to be constant. So constants are factors that stay fixed or the same. The data is what you gather in your experiment. 2 types of data that science can give us. We have quantitative data, quantity, numbers. Qualitative data. These are word descriptions of what our senses detect. So you think quantity, number, quality, word descriptions. If a controlled setting is not possible, for example, animal observations. If you are a mammologist that wants to study mammal behavior in the jungle, you need to go to the jungle to do that. You can't bring a bunch of jungle animals into a lab and expect them to act normal. So if you can't do a controlled setting, you need to be as accurate and unbiased as possible. After you've completed your experiment, you will analyze everything you have. You may put it into charts and graphs or computer models to have a visual for people to understand what you've been doing. A lot of times the data can lead to a new hypothesis, a new prediction, and even some new experiments. And perhaps one of the most important things that the scientific method is about is reporting what you've done. Publish experiments and research. Get that information out there. Scientists can't keep all the good information to themselves. This has been Biology 1, Chapter 1, The Study of Life.